I will introduce our speakers. So Claire O'Neill from Earthwise Aware is going to be going first, speaking on urban biodiversity and phenology citizen science. And she'll be followed by Brendan Keegan from the Arnold Arboretum, talking about their nest box monitoring program. So Claire, you'll share your screen. I'll ask everybody to mute. I think they already are. Take it away, Claire.
You see my screen?
I can.
All right. Because I'm not seeing what you are seeing, interestingly. So I'm going to ask for the first few screen, I'm going to ask what you see just to make sure. All right, so before I really start the presentation, I figured out that I would show some of the websites. So I'm Claire O'Neill, and I know a few of you, but not all of you. So I think that maybe for once I would introduce myself about where am I coming from, because I spend my time talking about Earthwise Aware, but I don't necessarily speak about myself. So I'm Claire O'Neill. As you can hear from my accent, I'm not from here originally. I'm both French and American, by the way, but I am French, despite the last name. I know that the last name is a little bit, it throws people off a little bit there. O'Neill, where does it come from? That's my husband's name. And I am the founder of Earthwise Aware. This is our website. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do in the area. So I'm the founder of Earthwise Aware. I'll explain all about Earthwise Aware in a minute. I'm also the board member of the Friends of the Fells, for people who didn't know that. And I am the chair of their Nature Conservation Committee. And since I'm here and I'm talking to the Boston Biodiversity Consortium, I want to make an announcement, meaning that if you have an interest in the fells and you want to join this Nature Conservation Committee, please do so. One of my mandate as being a member of the Friends of the Fells is really to try to push conservation and citizen science within the organization. And the reason why the fells is because a lot of our programs or our studies happen at the fells. So that's announcement number one. I'm also, as of this year, I've been asked to be a co-chair, the co-chair of the Citizen Science Ethics Working Group, and I accepted that. And for this kind of group, my mandate is twofold. So of course, to help Lisa Rasmussen, who is a philosopher, to run this group. But me, what I want to bring into the picture in this group is biodiversity ethics, because I do believe, I do think that ethics or biodiversity ethics is really lacking in terms of standards in the field of citizen science, and sometimes maybe even with science. And actually one of the local person working a little bit on that is Richard Primack, so I want to reach out to him. I met him in the past. So that's that. Talking about what kind of thing I also do. So this year I am still part of the steering committee for the City Nature Challenge in the Boston area, with a few people that are here on this call, such as Peter, that I can see right in this top bar right now. And I've seen Mark Albert and a few others. So that's about my involvement. And you can see that a lot of things has to do, of course, with citizen science. Now, let's go to the meat of the talk here. So I'm going to present. So everybody has seen, the different website, because I couldn't see what you saw. I'm looking at Peter. Can you nod your head? Okay, great, wonderful, excellent. So Earthwise Aware. Earthwise Aware is EWA, or we call it EWA for short. And really what we focus on is biodiversity. For us, it's about bringing biodiversity knowledge and science, ecological ethics, and environmental leadership to the heart, to the core of organization and communities and in the daily lives of people. We are known for different things. Some know us through our guides and etiquettes, ecological guides and etiquettes, which focus either on habitats, on species, and helping us to manage ourselves better, right? Doing our many, I would say, human activities such as birding, volunteering, being a good conservation leader. Some that focus, for example, on species are on bats, on great apes. We have one on great apes. People are very surprised by that one because we don't have many great apes in the area. But actually, you have to know that when I started Earthwise Aware, I'm the founder, so I started it in 2017. That's when we incorporated and we got our 501c3. My network was actually global. So I kind of started global by reaching out right away to the people who I had in my network, and then when I started really to finally focus on something that I had planned, citizen science, then I started to really pin down and to really delve in citizen science and therefore being more local. So that's why we have graded, etiquettes, and we work that with a climatologist. So some know us who are guides and etiquette, some other know us who are nature activities. They are kind of nature experiences that we put online. So they come in the form of lessons plans, and people can take them, and enact them, in nature. So some, for instance, are, forest immersion activity. Another one is about, of course, documenting through INAT. Another one might be about tuning in by sound and this kind of thing. So we have a set of these nature lessons out there. But most of the people now know us who are a form of citizen science. And that's something that is very dear to me because I've been involved in citizen science or science for the past 30 years, right? But before I get into that, so you know that for me, for us at EWA, it's really about biodiversity. So that's my attempt to a form of humor. I'm not a very humorous person. I'm kind of a very, how do you say that, deliberate or literal person, but I was pretty about that one. And that came because of the next slide. You're going to see that. But for me, it's really kind of a shocker to see that biodiversity, everybody here in America, right, talks about climate change, right? This is kind of the major crisis. I mean, even if people do not necessarily agree about what it means or what are the implications and how to solve that. But I'm always very surprised to see that people are fairly oblivious, ignorant, who don't know about the other crisis, right? And there are really very major crises out there. And one of them, which is as important in my opinion than climate change and does not completely equate to climate change, is biodiversity loss, right? So there was something in The Guardian, I think later this last year, saying that biodiversity loss is the most important story that most people have never heard about. I agree. I really agree about that. So one of my little secret mission is really to have people understand, better what biodiversity loss is about and what we can do. So of course, when there is a consortium like this one, I'm going to be part of it. I want to be part of it, right? So the hippo, the thing about the hippo, you're going to see that here. But one of the things that I really try to raise attention to when I talk to the people who join, our EWA events or programs, is raising awareness about what is a great decline. So it's not about being green, it's about really reality, what it means, right? In 2018, I've been following what the LPI or Living Planet Index has been reporting for the past 10 years. And each time, I don't know if you've seen, but they kind of shift a little bit the percentage of population size decline, right? And it's normal from a statistical point of view, it's because you have more sample and more studies coming into the picture. So you're somehow refining, that numbers. And the last one was this kind of big news, which there was a decline of 60% in the population averages, not of all overall population, misunderstanding of statistic, but in terms of population sizes across the world and of vertebrates between, the past roughly 40 years, right? So that's a big average drop, and it's really kind of puzzling to see that people are really not aware of that. This thing here that I really bring attention to as well to our communities is the fact that, the extension rate has been really, it's manifold what it should be in a sense, compared to the normal, extension rate without necessarily an interference with our human activities. So these are things that I regularly bring, into light. So the hippo here, before I go there, so my attempt to humor, is I really like that, and that was coming from a talk 2 years ago. E.O. Wilson, right, was giving a talk at the Not All Society, right? And I really like this mnemonic because it's really, you can really remember it very easily. So, and I often trick, or ask my volunteers or our young interns what it could stand for. I suppose that all of you here know what it means, but it really represents, kind of the major threat to biodiversity, which I call the Hippo Effect, right? So habitat destruction, invasive species, pollution, population growth. This is something that I do not, shy away from. I think that it's important that we have a discussion about our numbers, right? And of course, over harvesting. It was very interesting, the first time I heard about this mnemonic is that, climate change is not really part of the picture. That is changing. Climate change is also a very strong contributor to the biodiversity loss. but it's definitely something that doesn't equate, right? So, and that's something that I like to raise attention to, so that we get the people to stop thinking that by solving climate change, we're going to solve the biodiversity loss issue. That is not at all how it's going to happen. These two things has to work, together, right? As well as a water crisis, which is another big crisis. So now, to go back to citizen science. So I really like this quote. So when I came to America, I had to catch up a little bit on who are the great conservationists, in America. And of course, I stumbled upon Aldo Leopold. I just read, finally, after all this year, a Sand County Almanac. And I was puzzled to see that, by the way, little digression, I was really puzzled to see that what he wrote in the 1940s or 50s, those issues are actually exactly the same today. And for a little brief moment, I'm not someone who seek despair or anything like that. I was kind of heartbroken because we are talking about 50 years ago and still we have the same issues there. All right, let's go back to the positive, Claire. Can we be ethical only in relation to something? We can only be ethical, in relation to something that we can feel, understand, or otherwise have faith in. Is there such a way? Yes, in my opinion, there is one, a big one, which is citizen science. Citizen science is a fantastic modern mean to really bring the people back into the reality of our landscape. All right. So to talk briefly about our model, I know it's a mouthful, but I like words and I like the precision of words. So for us, what it is, for IWA, what we are doing is place-based, cross-landscape, co-creative biodiversity citizen science. Every single of these little words have an importance. Let me explain to you. Place-based is because we get to have an intimate relationship with different species where we have our studies, right? Cross-landscape is because we bring our people not to stay in a single place, like the fells or the different study site in the fells, or fresh pond, we do something in the Lusitania meadow there, or Mastodon habitat, or the growing center, or other different little spaces in Somerville. What we like to do is really to bring the people and to really lead them, engage them in this different landscape or habitat so that they are able to see the variability and how these different things have an importance, in terms of one another, right? Let's go back to place-based for a second. Another thing that is important about these words, place-based, is what we like to do is really to see things not in terms of the details, but really to look at systems. And that comes from my background as well, by the way. I started my studies in biology, in natural sciences. That's how it was called in France at the time, 30 years ago. And then I shifted to statistics. I started my career in Bayesian statistics, right? Doing predictor models and stuff that actually are of use in conservation world. And then I made the whole of my career studying large, nonlinear dynamic systems. So, graphs of information, how things, flow from nodes to another, depending on constraint. And often people say, well, what does it have to do, math and what you are doing at IWA? And I said, everything, because when you look at nature, it's nothing else than the large, nonlinear dynamic systems. So the point being here that I always had a tendency to look at things in system rather than just looking at the low unit, right? Looking at the system is super important. And actually it will bring me to another thing from E.O. Wilson in a minute. So co-creative, I like co-creative because it's more, citizen science, the word, the term itself started in the 90s. Actually, interestingly, at the same time, it was defined in America and in Great Britain at the time. And I really enjoy the definition from the Brits, which is quite something from the French, just a teasing, but because for the Brits, what it was really bringing the different community and to make sure that this community, this different demographic, this different group were bringing their skills together. And I firmly believe that there is no other way for us to solve conservation problems than by putting our skills together on the table. And that means the ecologist, the statistician, the mother who knows their forest intimately because she shows it to her child every single day, right? So all these different parts are very important, and the citizen scientist or the naturalist. So for us, it's about advancing biodiversity and climate research, so citizen science, it's only the citizen science program. And for me, I always have been there for the past 30 years, it's really a matter of giving science back to the people, to really be able to give the tools for the people to make informed decisions, to understand what is happening, to go below the surface level knowledge, right? Something that is shocking, in my opinion, is that there is less than 20% of the American population that can understand, grasp basic science. Basic science. And when I say basics, I'm talking about documentary level, TV documentary level science. And when it comes to ecological or environmental science, it drops to less than 12%, and even in our area, Boston area, right? So that's something that I find heartbreaking, because really science is not the answer to all, but it gives incredible tools to understand and to make actions. So our model, species and ecosystem knowledge, you really focus on that. You know that ethics is it's a strong pillar for us, and we try to push that, right? Are you going to learn more about, open and global science? For me, it's critical. I've made a living before switching to EWA, doing open and global science, and certainly global data, right? And democratization of science, the importance of really putting science back into the hand of the people. That's my little moment of fame last year. I was so proud of that. I'm not a groupie type at all, but it was really quite something to be in, the close vicinity of this wonderful man, right? And E.O. Wilson is calling, he has been calling for quite a while, but he's calling for really observing and studying systems. So we definitely completely fit, within that call. All right, this is our postcard about our program there. So I want to briefly raise systems. Some of the people, or a class of people, I don't like to put people in bins, but I think that, the naturalists, all of us have this naturalist quality, to observe. And we start like that. If you look at the great apes, by the way, in their young age, you can see that they have a very inquisitive look at nature, right? I think we all have that in us, and we might completely forget it because we are sucked, by the society and its system. But the importance of the naturalist is something that we need to rekindle. I mean, it's really critical going forward. I often remind our people, the people who come to our walks or do our programs with us, that citizen science were started actually by naturalists. These were really citizen science. The naturalists, very strong naturalists, were simply Darwin or Jane Goodall. I saw her a couple of years ago, incredible woman. These were people who didn't necessarily have a science degree, but they were a very keen observer of nature. And so this is often, what I say to people to say, and then, there is you coming with us because you have this knowledge in you and you can grow it, on your own or with us. So what I'm really trying to do with some of this program is to help people reclaiming the naturalist in them, right, through citizen science. Okay. So in terms of citizen science and going into the details there. So I am part of another network, which is a European network, which wants to be international, which is the Global Earth Observation System. It was started by the Germans. Germans are super good at data, right, and trying to formalize and put protocols in place. I like their approach to try to standardize, although standardization of data across nation is tough, but at least you have something that is comparable enough so that it's harmonizable. That meaning that you can really have a projection of some of the dimension that we are studying, and then suddenly you can compare this kind of entities there. So this is one of their graphs speaking of, some of the biological mechanisms that are commonly shapes response to climate change and that are often missing from current predictive models. And a lot of what we study somehow amount to provide some answers to some of these categories there. But more generally, the need for all of us, right, is we need to understand, predict, and act in a timely manner. We don't necessarily have much time in a sense, so it's now that we have to act. We have to be bold, yet humble. And the issues that we have and that we forget often is that, what we have observed yesterday is changing today. So often people say, oh, I saw that yesterday, or I saw that a month ago. And I said, your little iNaturalist experience is actually important because you are creating a continuous map of what's going on out there, at least of what you can see. So occurrence data more than anything there. Another thing too is that not enough is observed. And that's one thing that we really try to do very hard at Earthwise Aware, is to bring people to stop, to step a little bit outside the box of the charismatic species or the pretty things, but really to step, to step backward a little bit, not backward, but take a step backward so that they can look at the picture a little bit more and see what happens to the system, right? And so that they start looking or noticing the things that are not necessarily noticeable because you didn't pay attention to that, right? So enlarging our horizon of what we observe. So that's one of the things that I think is very important in terms of the citizen science, action that we can take there. And of course, important factors are missed altogether. So, and you can see that a little illustration of that I give is often when you look at iNaturalist data, this beautiful platform about, biodiversity occurrence, as you see a lot of zoom cropped out pictures about a single entity. And then you don't necessarily see the plant that it is on it. Or if there was another insect on that exact same plant, you don't really capture the interaction between these two species there. The point here is saying that a lot of things are missed because we have a little bit of a tunnel vision. Same thing by looking and taking a system vision, a system sight of the thing, then we can start, enlarging our horizon and understand much more there. So the good news, again, is that citizen science and the way of doing it in a system manner can help fill a lot of those gaps. I'm not going to delve on that because you're going to have a view of it. But this is some of the platform. You're going to see that we use, and I'm going to simply go directly into some of our sites. So we do a lot of things, and we actually survey regularly. I'm counting in my head, we have about 40 sites that we survey regularly across about 8 cities. Of course, a lot of those sites happen at the fells, and they are sites of different, nature, right? So here you see the fells. We operate a lot here, we also operate at Mass Audubon Habitat, where we do arthropod surveys there, several times. We do arthropod surveys there as well at the Fresh Pond, so in the Lusitania Meadow. You don't see enough there because it's very small. They're little gardens, but we do things at the Growing Center, as well as in a few streets in Somerville, right? This is just a view straight from iNaturalist, so it's just a kind of a biodiversity mapping view. We have on iNaturalist something like 40,000 species, or observations, sorry, not the species. And this is just a straight out of the box view of some of our sites there. All right, I just kind of put that there because I didn't want to forget that. We do not own, of course, any of those sites, which I like. I like that a lot because it really forces us to work, closely and establish partnership, right? We don't own the fells, it's managed by the DCR. So that means that we have to work with the DCR, right? And that's also how I got into the fronts of the fells, because as soon as I stepped into the fells to say, oh, that would be a fantastic study site, I say, who has a vested interest in the fells? And the fronts of the fells popped. And so I addressed them directly and I said, can we do something together? And they were interested. With Mass Audubon Habitat, same thing. So I like this site because it's different than an urban forest, right? It's more of a sanctuary, more tame. And so we went and discussed with the people from the Mass Audubon Habitat, and we established a partnership as well there. We have a wonderful relationship with the rangers of the Fresh Pond Reservoir, really very cool people. And we really have also a fantastic relationship with Growing Center and the Green and Open Space Somerville. So I really love this little habitat. It's very tiny, but there is so much happening there. So we are doing a lot of things there as well. So these are, a kind of a view from the top of what we are doing. So now let's zoom a little bit to give you an idea, and like that you're going to have a better sense of some of the uniqueness somehow of our programs. So here I just extracted a lot of the other sites and just zoomed on some that are kind of phenology and arthropod survey, centered, focused. And specifically, oh yes, that's true. We're going there tomorrow. I forgot. We're going to add that more formally as a systematic, site, because we're doing a lot of survey in the area around this reservoir. Right? But here, let me have you step through what we are doing. So every week we go over there. Actually, I was there with Mina. Mina is on the call there. And Mina is one of our young interns. And so every week we go there and we start, there is a parking, which is, somewhere down below. And here we start by walking on the Cranberry Trail, where we really tune in and we do bird counting. For that, we use eBird as well as the National Phenology Network Nature's Notebook. So we do a kind of a cross, posting of our observation there. Then we arrive here. Right, actually, we arrive further down because we want to see a little bit what's there to have a better count of some of the species here. Then we arrive at our first site here. And on this first site, we have a set of species that for which we follow their phenology, right? And which is, maple, sassafras, so there's a bunch of water lilies, a lot of, shrubs such as not cranberries, what is the name of this? Blueberries, blueberries, etc. So there is a set of species there for which we follow the phenology using the protocol from the Nature's Notebook. I like rigor, and I think that they have a pretty good protocol there. We've been working closely with them. And then we continue on this path where we do some visual using INAT to store our data. So visual survey of arthropod along the path. We arrive here where there is an American chestnut. We kind of grew fond of this one. That was actually one of the reasons for the choice of that species in our protocol. We're just checking if it's going to ever fruit. I doubt, but if it fruits, that's something that we want to alert, the natural heritage people right away. There is a mountain laurel there. And then we continue this survey, which is a visual survey occurrence data. And then we arrive here where we have what's called a circle because we use the caterpillars count protocol from the University of North Carolina. And there we are counting arthropods on a few trees that we have marked and feeding information to that platform, which is the caterpillars count, right? And then we continue there, also counting birds along the way. Then here, same thing. And then we arrive at a site which is a mix, right? Phenology and caterpillars or arthropods count there. And we've been doing that regularly to the clock, except that if there is bad weather, for the past 2 years, right? And then we continue there. By the way, we pass a vernal pool because we do vernal pool assessment as well and documentation there. And then we go back. So this route take us roughly, just for this site, about 3 hours. During COVID, it was very interesting because we like to do that in group when we can because it strengthens really the quality of our data, but we couldn't be in groups anymore. So we created dynamics map, interactive maps with Google Maps so that people can find the site because it's one thing to do it in a park. It's another thing when you have to do it in a forest and you cannot even mark really your species, neither mark the trail per se, right? DCR doesn't allow that. So we created interactive maps so that people could point there, click on their species and go there through the Google Maps. So it's pretty cool. Force you to be really innovative in a sense. So when we started that, people from the outside said, oh my God, so you're doing bird counting, phenology, arthropod, etc., all in 3 hours? I said, yes. I said, well, that's too much. And I said, no, not at all. Because what it forced you to do somehow is to look at things in system, and then very quickly, you start to see that things really depend on each other and things happen because of, what happens with another thing, right? So very quickly, people start to be in love and anticipate, their little visit because they are going to wait for the wood thrush that they know is more or less in this area. Then over time, they start to pay attention more about the migration of birds, what happened, when the things leave out, do we have caterpillars that are going to feed these birds, etc. So somehow, very quickly, there is this love of seeing things working all together. And that's one of our goals, that people start thinking of things working together rather than just, in little units, right? So that's that. Okay, about our arthropod survey per se. So we have actually, so even there, we don't like to have a single protocol. And same thing, people said, oh, you're using 3 different methods. And I said, well, it's because no method is good enough, right? And when you start understanding what you're doing, you're really seeing, oh yes, this is missing, or I don't have the same picture there. A very good example of that is when we were looking at, oh yeah, actually, good thing. We have this is a fresh pond here that you see here. And we have marked trees and we were counting stuff. And it was very poor of what we were counting. We couldn't really have good abundance there. However, when we were walking, we could see so much in the meadow. You have a meadow and you have trees around, right? So that's why we decided that we wanted to do both, species occurrence and mapping, as well as arthropod counting, right? In order to have a better picture, of the overall system, right? So one is about seeing, one is about counting, right, with the caterpillars count. And we are starting really to put more things together and connecting with, for example, we do that at the Growing Center, where we also look at different species, of plants or wildflowers in this case, and we look at the relationship, the direct relationship with their pollinators, right? So connecting the dots together. So just wanted to throw that because, and people like to do that together because there is kind of a reward, they count stuff and sometimes it's hard to count, right? Because things do not show up. Then they have the rewards for seeing somehow, right? And then here for really the knowledge-driven people, who likes to connect the dots, really they plunge very quickly in this kind of a protocol there. All right, so it's not just about phenology or arthropod. Remember, we do a lot of things at the FEL. So I wanted to show you that because this one is one that really raised attention, certainly on the social media, and this is our poop map. Right. So it's really taking momentum. Finally, I'm known for being resilient. Right? I'm going to, if I see that there is something that can succeed, I'm going to go for it. Right. And so we started in November. So first, last year, we saw so much poop and litter in bags or unbagged of dogs. And I can recognize my dog poop versus my coyote poop, for example. Right. And so that, we were flirting with the idea to have a map. Someone from the DCR say, okay, maybe we can use iNaturalist for that. I said, I don't want to use iNaturalist for that. I don't want to litter iNaturalist with this kind of data, right? I don't think it would necessarily be fair either to our project. I prefer to separate it, right? And so we started to create, so I don't like to reinvent the wheel either. So I was looking for maybe apps or groups out there that have something. And there is a UK group that has a good map. However, I didn't like the lack of persistence of their data. So I'm still hoping that someone is doing it somewhere and I'm going to find a good map that has persistent data over time, right? But right now, so we decided to have a kind of a shared album, Google Photo album, where people can, dump, no pun intended, but their poop data there, right? And so also it allows us to clean the data to make sure that there is no malicious kind of data, because this is a very sensitive topic for some people. And then every month we pull the data up in this map and we create months layer. And we want to create actually survey layers as well with more specific survey. Because right now we are in the phase where we're gathering data to see more or less where the density would be. And then at some point we want to create, you can see some trail there. We want to create more systematic survey throughout the year where you have a better picture of the entire FELS, right? And so that we can establish a baseline data that can enable other kind of studies such as, I don't know, water pollution, wetlands, soil, and this kind of things. So this was a June. So we're becoming very creative. This one, the June emoji. We are not fixed yet on the July emoji, maybe orange with sunglasses, something like that. So anyway, it's also a good way to do citizen science because some people sometimes are intimidated with going through phenology or counting bugs, etc. So some people like that because it's an easy way in a sense, and it really achieves something also in terms of awareness. So that's that. Another very important program that we do is the vernal pool documentation and certification. There's about 130 vernal pools in the FELS, something like that. Half of them have been certified meaning that they have a specific status, right? They are recognized as vernal pool and they are granted, some kind of additional protection. Let's put it this way. People often say to me, I don't understand, why do we need to do that in the FELS? It's a park. And I say, well, because you allow the DCR potentially to be able to manage better their trail, maybe even to move trails because they are too close to some vernal pools, right? It's not because you're in a park and certainly not in the FELS that you are protected. Look at the map that we just saw, right? Dog poop, right? So there is actually a kind of a correlation with that there, with these two maps. I think they are important, just thought about that. Last year we certified 2, and this year we, even with COVID, we were able to get out and to conduct some surveys, and we found evidence of 3 pools. We're going to certify that this year. All right. Oh, yes. For that, not everybody can go and just go in a pool in the FELS. You have to have a permit, right? And the permit is actually fairly strict. The DCR are very strict people, not necessarily easy to work with, but in terms of the organization, but it's important to follow as much as possible what they want and not, drive more, bad blood and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's what I just said. We had 2 certification last year. That was our first year of survey, and 3 more confirmed candidates. The data platform that we use, and I want to briefly talk about that. So you've seen iNaturalist, we store, sorry, I tried to find that. Actually, let me do that way. Yes. So iNaturalist, we really have, it's more about composition, it's visual, there is no negative data in this sense there, but it gives you kind of a sense of what you see. So, and it's a very nice platform, by the way, to get the people excited about citizen science. And we use that as, you know, the venue, the conduct to do more deeper kind of citizen science. National Phenology Network, I really love what they do. We have a very good relationship. We work with them. Actually, we got their Phenology Award last year, right, as a partner. And Caterpillar Scan, they have a very, I like their protocol as well for different reasons. Their protocol is great because they are working not at a species level, but they really encourage the people to log at the order level, which is also fantastic to have people, newcomers, not being intimidated by identifying, you know, bug species or species of insect or arthropods in general. I also use that because, you know, all the data of these three platforms are completely open, right? And they serve, you know, their organization. INAT is different, but certainly the National Phenology Network and the Caterpillar Scan, it serves their own study, their own purposes. The National Phenology Network also serves the purpose of other organizations who can use this data. So that's very important because it's about collaboration, right? What I like about them is we use their data because, you know, they're looking at order level, which is actually important. And I often sell that this way to the people who come to our survey. In America, we're very species oriented. We're very species focused. And often I say, you know, we look at the tree, we don't look at the forest. We forget about the forest. Again, it's about system, right? And so this way, right, looking much higher in the taxonomy, you start to have actually good idea of what's going on in terms of abundance, right, in general, and across taxa. And the Germans are very good at that. In America, we didn't do that. So this kind of data, in my opinion, is very important and really fulfill a very specific kind of a purpose there. So, and I want to dig into that. So that's that. Speaking of data, so you know data. In my opinion, in our line of work, biodiversity, what we are doing, you, us, data that is not open, that is not shared, that is not accessible widely, and is not comparable in the meaning that it doesn't follow any kind of standardization or cannot be harmonized. In my opinion, it's very anecdotal often, right? And questionable, right? I think that in this day and age, we need to work better together so that we can really have data that can serve multiple purposes, right? So these are, again, some of the platforms that we use. We are starting to investigate this one for invasive mappings. We are piloting some systematic invasive mapping in the fells, right? And there, this platform that you see here is where we, how do you say that? Submit, you know, the application for certification of the Vernal pool, right? So very important, again, for me, data is a data that is on a spreadsheet. That's why we really push our people in the field to work directly from an app, so that clearly we can very quickly clean the data, see the data, right, together, and it's going somewhere right away because it's shared. That is very important. All right, I'm not going to explain everything. There's no point for that, but you know, if you ever were curious, this is last year we released our first citizen science report. And this is actually what really drove the attention of the National Phenology Network here. That's what gives us the Pheno Champion Award. So we wanted to do something that was completely comprehensive, that was really showing the entire picture. Remember, it's about system and it's about storyline. So we wrote this report a little bit almost like a storyline. All modules are, you know, you can extract them, but there is a thread throughout that. I wrote the first draft because I'm the statistician in the group, right? So I'm not afraid of graphs and stuff like that. But my goal is from the start that the citizen scientists themselves, at some point, are going to take ownership of, you know, these modules and work together. Because it's not my first language, you know. As soon as I have the draft out, I ask to our, you know, volunteers and citizen scientists, I say, hey, this is what we're going to publish this year. Can you please, you know, provide your feedback? And it was actually fantastic to see the work that they did because they took complete ownership of this report. They, you know, reworked some of the section, etc., so that the story was really strong together, right? So it's already from the first year, it was a collaborative work, right? And that's what I wanted. This raised the attention of the National Phenology Network because it was not just about them, it was about them, but in the larger story. And it was also telling the story about how we engage our communities, and they loved it. So that's why we got the Phenology, the Vernal Champion Award. I want to mention as well that any of this platform, as mentioned, and I've seen some of our work. So even iNaturalist, which is a little bit harder because it's kind of drowned, I don't want to say that, diluted in the flow of information that goes on iNaturalist. Here, this is very interesting. So I've noted a few statistical ambiguities, and actually there are more than I just saw. And I contacted Alan, who is behind the Caterpillar Scout, to say, by the way, here is some statistical ambiguity, and they worked on it right away. So, and actually have ideas of protocols with an extension of protocols that they, we're working together lightly. And so I like this kind of relationship where, it's about bridging, not just the site partners, but also the data partners, the citizen scientists together, the communities. It's about, working all together, again, working all together. So if you click, I think this presentation is public. So if you click on any of the things, you'll see, the full report or the short report. All right, where am I in time? Now, what I'd like to do, so that's one thing, EWA is one thing. We don't own any site. We really work through partnership. And of course, we bring, our people in. People have asked, for instance, oh, Claire, do you want to do something in Blue Hills? I say, we can't. We're too small, right? But you can, right? There's no reason why you can't. And so my secret agenda is that at some point, actually, not that we need to follow exactly the same protocol, but that we really build a kind of a network of citizen science about urban biodiversity and phenology, right? And that we work together so that we have at the end, data that can fit and can be understood in the larger framework of our region, right? And where we help each other. The benefit of that, for instance, I see it. So already what we've done just in our little network, internal network, let's put it this way, is bringing ammunition when we talk to Mayor Joe in Somerville, right? When we talk about native ordinance of these kind of things, right? So what people don't understand often is that bringing evidence-based type of data, right, working really understanding how systems work together, bring really strong evidence of and ammunition about how we can influence, our politicians, for instance, right? So I'd like that. So this is a call to all of us at the Biodiversity Consortium. Do we want to create? Do we see ourselves working together? Right? I mean, I'm seeing, for example, Mount Auburn Cemetery. They have been doing a lot of, using some of the protocols, Caterpillar Scout, etc., these kind of things. Can we work together in a manner that is not silo-oriented? Because I've seen too many silos. It's only in my industrial, world. Can we work in a way where we are more together so that we help one another, we help our scientists, we help our state, we help data nationally and even internationally, right? So, these kind of comparisons here that you see, that's just our foresight. We could do much more. I was telling Susan that I was looking at their data at the Arboretum last year, first because it's a very good validation kind of data. They have been into it for a long while. So they are kind of our peer in a sense and say, okay, are we doing well? Right, this kind of thing. So helping one another. And the Nature's Notebook or the National Phenology Network, the way the data is out there allows that seamlessly, right? So that's what I like about this kind of protocol. So that's my little call to us, which is, can we do really impactful science for all together? Can we have a network? Can we think about a network working more together, maybe create a committee together where we do a kind of more standardized or harmonizable type of citizen science, certainly to build a kind of natural history of our place. Okay, oh yeah, that's true, I forgot. Co-creative, collaborative citizen science, what does it do? It helps science, plus it helps us as a species. It makes important, it makes our data count and be visible, right? I do believe, and I've seen that with our citizen scientists, that it empowers individuals and communities, certainly through informed decision, but also excitement of what they see. It's a wonderful way to engage the people and keep us engaged with nature, right? It makes us feel, just to go back and to look back to what Aldo Leopold was saying, understand ethically and want to protect biodiversity and Earth system. For me, it's really about Earth citizenship and leadership in action. So I just call us for that. That's it. That's my last slide from a wonderful man calling us all naturalists to work together.
Thank you, Claire. Wonderful presentation. I don't see that the specific questions have been written yet, so if, oh, here's one from Mark. Mark, why don't you go ahead and unmute and ask yourself.
I just said wonderful integration of various components of the ecosystems and platforms. It's an inspiring model. I guess a question that I would have is, you know, not having read the Pheno Champion awarded report, I would imagine that it's really challenging to put together the various, you know, data sets together in a way that, you know, that is able to be analyzed as a whole in terms of what's happening to this in this, you know, throughout the system and the components of the system. I would trust that things will emerge over time as you continue to follow this model. But I guess I would just ask whether you have any sort of more specific ideas regarding how the phenology data and the caterpillars count data and the iNaturalist surveys are intended to be ultimately looked at together analytically, or if it's sort of you're building towards something and you'll see what emerges.
Yes, and you're right. I mean, so far this part has been kind of easy because it's baseline data, right? And it's also you're working on your protocols, so you're also because you're working on your protocols, you're also refining your data and the quality of your data. So there is a very steep increase in the quality of our data. That's, by the way, why we do things. We like to do things in groups to speed up that process and challenge, you know, one another through the process. In terms of when you look at species and correlation with phenology, etc. Yes, it's going to be a little bit hard, but tools are opening very quickly as well. And I also know, for instance, that there might be more integration between Nature's Notebook and iNaturalist at some point. So they are looking at, you know, things in a slightly more integrated way, right? It's only at that level. And as for Nature's Notebook, I think that they also try to connect more internationally because Nature's Notebook is US based for now. But there's going to be an attempt, and there is discussion going on right now about, you know, something that is more international, which is going to be interesting about seeing the dynamic of the phenology in different parts of the world as well. But us locally, it's going to be more about, you know, what happens, you know, in relation to what phenology, and that's thing that we can do and probably extract the data. It's probably not too hard, that aspect, because the data tables are there. It just takes a good statistician, you know, at this point, right? And we'll refine along the way, by the way, because we're probably going to have, one of the goals that we have with our citizen scientists is that we like to have them being involved at every single process of the scientific process, which is, you know, in every single step, sorry, meaning, you know, from formulating the questions or at least, you know, working from a data set that is used by other platforms, and then so that it drives more questions that are of more pertinence, you know, locally, right, native, to pollinator relationship, for example, in Somerville. And Amy Myrtle does always already something like that. So there is, we'll start to collaborate, Amy and I would love to see something that is more integrated between our work and I. And I know that Amy is in this call, by the way. What was I saying with that? So it's going to evolve because we're going to have citizen scientists. I want them to be able to formulate the question of importance with respect to their own problem in their community, in their city, right? So these are local matters there. But the data is there, and I think that, you know, there's a lot of proxy, and you can say a lot from this kind of data if you have the data. The problem often is that you just don't have the data. You don't have enough, you don't have a good enough sample of that, or you have sparse data. And if you have sparse data, well, in terms of interpretation or in terms of result, it's much harder, right, to understand and to make a big picture. So it's going to be interesting in the next 2 years. You know, people ask me about the report this year, and they go, that wonderful storyline, how about next year? So, well, next year is still a baseline, because 2 years, you just have 2 data points more than anything. It doesn't constitute a trend, even if you have big samples behind the scene. But in a sense, we have time. We have nature's cycle time. You know, we have a year at a time. And I think that we can really do things that are pretty cool if we have the data in between the gaps. Did I answer your question, Mark, more or less?
Yeah, it's a big, huge question. So yeah, yes, I'll say yes.
Do we have someone want to queue up another question? I have a couple, but if somebody else wants to chime in as well, why don't you queue something up in the chat? And we'll probably just take another couple of minutes for questions for Claire, so we give Brendan enough time as well. But Claire, I'm interested in how do you initially reach your core of citizen scientists? You know, where do you find these people? How do you engage them? And you know, how many do you engage, you know, on a regular basis?
So last year we had, it's in the report, but I forgot the numbers. But last year we had engaged, and it was kind of a slow start. I would say we had people, maybe 100 and something, right? And now the core one, it's a different story, right? And I want to make a little tension there. Often people said, how do you retain volunteers? And I say, you don't. That's not how it works. If you're starting by thinking that, okay, I want to have volunteers and I want to keep them, it's not going to work because they have their life as well, right? So we make our kind of events, it's a streamline. We keep doing the same talk over and over again. People come, people go, and some along the way will stick. They really will stick. And actually it serves a purpose for every one of them, even the one who come and go, simply because they visit the town, or because, you know, they have something else in their life, or they just have this time at that moment in their life, and it's perfectly fine. And as long as we feel that we can bring something to their life, I'm happy with it, right? But of course, we work a lot and we worship this little core of, you know, persistence as citizen scientists. During COVID-19, I had some of the people taking over full site to make sure that, you know, I and some other people had time for doing other studies. And we have more data now than last year, you know, in December. Why? Because we had some citizen scientists going in the field and surveying some of this site all on their own, right? 4 hours at a time. I'm like, I mean, they took it, it became so important. I'm thinking of Susan here, right? And some of her citizen scientists, it became so important for other reasons such as scoping that, you know, they spend that time. Now, how do we engage them initially? I'm good at networking, right? So that's one of the things. So, and social media. I don't like social media, but they have a purpose. So social media, partnership. So through the partnership, important. Through forums as well. And actually every single community has kind of their favorite form of, you know, engagement. For example, Somerville forums works well. For them, you know, the growing, not the growing center. Yeah, the growing center forum is one, but the green and open space is a very active forum. A lot of things is happening through Google Forum there. You look at Freshpond, for that, it was really the partnership newsletter. That's how it brought, you know. Eventbrite had its own thing as well. We put our public event on Eventbrite. Facebook correspond more to the fells, for instance. I'm missing one. Mastodon Habitat, tough one. I guess the demographic is slightly different, maybe older, I don't know. I'm having a hard time, but I'm getting once in a while people from the Eventbrite community, or I'm getting people to love that place coming from another site, because we bring them and say, come to the Habitat to make a difference, to see, to compare. And then they fall in love, and then now they extend to Mastodon Habitat. So it's a lot about communication. It's a lot about being actually in the field with the people, right? That's another thing too that we do, which is we are constantly out in the field, and we invite the people to join our core, you know, kind of a core citizen science, you know, collection, let's put it this way, when we're in the field. And then people can do that on their own as well, but we are there in the field, and they are invited to come. And they come because then suddenly what happens is a community form, a kind of a family, right? And they also realize very quickly that it's a fantastic way to challenge your knowledge, as well as to strengthen, you know, your data, because you're looking at this phenology, you're looking at this bud, and now you don't have only one pair of eyes, you have suddenly 10 pairs of eyes. I'm exaggerating there, we're never that many at any session, but looking at that bud and talking about it. And you should see some of this discussion. It goes for 15 minutes looking at a bud of a mountain laurel, honestly. So there is not a single answer, Eric. It's really being out there with the different media, right? Social platform, newsletter, partnering with other organizations. Partnering, I think, is very important, right? Did I answer your question or not?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I see Rob shared a link on chat to a story on Living on Earth that covers a lot of the same concepts, I guess, that we're talking about now. I'll look forward to listening to that, Rob. I'll take one more question. If you have one, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing. So there's some of the data and graphs. I like graphs, by the way.
Thanks. Well, I'll ask one more question then, if no one else has one. So when you're using iNaturalist to record your observations, I'm thinking particularly of that where you showed that circuit of weekly walks, and you're using iNaturalist. You know, are there any parameters that you're using by which what to select to enter into iNaturalist? Because, you know, I find, you know, when we do these things at Franklin Park, you know, we're really only doing the observational data. We're not incorporating all the other things that I wish we could incorporate, as you point out. But you know, a lot of stuff, like you see the same thing over and over again. You know, you go every year. In iNaturalist, you're only just observing that yes, that thing was there. That thing is always there. You know, so do you continuously record that same individual or that same specimen, you know, every week?
Yeah, we do. So because we are interested in the life cycle of that thing, right? So for instance, we have tons of pictures of maple leaf viburnum because they have a very interesting kind of, well, they all have an interesting phenology. So you have really interesting data set. And actually, this is how iNaturalist itself is starting to extract some of this data and are able to supply some of this phenology field on the side, right? So as well. Or graphs, because you can see that they have some graph. When you dig a little bit in iNaturalist data, you see that they have some graph coming from these pictures where they realize that there is a bud, and then there's a flower, and then there is, you know, this kind of things. So yes, it is important to record over and over again because it's a light form of phenology, and it supplies nicely the other phenology study that we do through Nature's Notebook, right? So we like to do mini bioblitz as well, just to make sure that we cover more than, you know, some of the species that we monitor closely, right? So that's why we enlarge, just to have a good sense of what's out there. We're becoming good actually as well there is one thing that iNaturalist bring is by taking all these pictures of these things, right? So record data, visual data. You also become familiarized. Of course, you become familiarized with one space, but you also realize what you don't know. And often you're going to hear a citizen scientist saying, oh, this is different than what I see. If he was not taking this picture every week, let's put it this way, he would probably not notice, right? So by repetition, core repetition like that, you also realize what is out of the ordinary. And then you have a new kind of data there as well. Because at the end, what it does, it makes your sense of observation more acute, right? And actually the human eyes is very good at distinguishing something that is out of the ordinary for us, right? So that's important data there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for a terrific presentation.
Thank you.